Hey, Robert Wickens, man. Uh, I'm just wondering, what is the excitement level when you finally figured out you could drive a race car again? Can you put it into words? Because I've been around race car drivers almost all my life, and you guys are a different breed mentally. Let me just put it that way. But what does it mean to you to be able to go fast again, but not just go fast again, but to compete?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the first moment I realized I could drive a race car again was actually virtually. Um, at the heart of the pandemic, esports kind of took center stage, and I had the opportunity to compete against the same people I was racing against before I was injured, although just from my own home. And it took a lot of hours to kind of figure out how to drive with hand controls again. But, quickly I was getting more and more competitive and then started beating some of them. And I was like, maybe I got a shot at this. But like the passion never lost my soul. I knew I needed to get back into a race car in some capacity. And I know it's been done before. There's been, many drivers that have come back from injury and raced with disabilities, whether, most famously Alex Zanardi,
Right.
right? Losing both of his legs and then not letting that slow him down and returning back into a touring car career, winning races in the WTCR, competing in the 24 Hours of Daytona, DTM races, driving a Formula One car, which I actually saw him do in person once when I was racing in Formula BMW at the time in the mid 2000s. So it was there was a lot of that motivated me. I knew it was possible. I just didn't really know how it would happen. And it wasn't until a very kind person named Bryan Herta gave me a call one day and said, "Hey, I might have an opportunity. Tell me honestly, do you want to race a car again?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, duh. Like I would love that. I've just never had the opportunity." And he said, "Perfect. I thought so." And then one thing led to the next, and the kind people at Hyundai, along with Bryan Herta, gave me the opportunity to get back into a race car again. And now here we are, 3 years later. We're champions in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge Series last year. And now trying to defend that title here this year in Mid Ohio.
I was going to say, what instinctively did you have to get to with your hands? You know what I mean? That you were used to doing that. When did you cross over that level of I'm responding with my hands here without thinking about it? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, from a race car driver standpoint, because let's face it, a lot of Alex Zanardi. I remember sitting with him for an hour one time and just talking about how he drove the race car with his feet. I mean, just the way he could make the manipulated stuff. When did it
Yep.
become obvious to you that you had crossed a threshold of reacting instinctively to things with your hands, if you follow with what you used to do with your feet?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some way being paralyzed almost made it easier. It's crazy to put that out there, but when I first got on the simulator and I'd want to brake for a turn, instinctively I would try to use my leg, but then my leg wouldn't move, and then quickly I was like, "Oh, that doesn't work." And then you realize, well, the brake's actually up here now. So
Yeah.
and then just one thing led to another, and then I think because I didn't have the ability to use my legs, using my hands became almost easier. um, Whenever I have friends and other drivers come over to the house and they try my simulator, they use the handbrake for the first couple breaks, and then once they kind of get the adrenaline and they get into the lap that they're driving, they always go back to their feet because it's so instinctive for them, and then they realize that actually doesn't work. So
Yeah.
um, it's the long answer is, frankly, I'm still perfecting it. Although we won the championship last year, we had a very successful season last year. Every time I'm in the car, whether if it's a race, qualifying practice, or test day, or even at home on my simulator on iRacing, I'm constantly getting better, and just hopefully still trying to climb up to those upper levels of motorsport. I love nothing more than to compete at the 24 Hours of Daytona with IMSA, or try to do the 24 Hours of Le Mans, or my teammates just had success last weekend at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, where they won their category in TCR with Hyundai. So
Yeah.
for me, I think there's still a lot of racing to be had. And yeah, but here in Mid Ohio, hopefully we can get our first win of the season.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think most average people would freak out if they knew that the airplane they get on, a lot of the jetliners you get on anymore are fly by wire, not, you're not you're not connected by wheels and pulleys and all that kind of stuff to the rudder and the ailerons, et cetera. I mean, is this? Can you explain to people? Is this an almost purely drive-by-wire kind of system? Obviously, with controls on the steering wheel, et cetera, with the exception of maybe the steering. But explain to people what you're actually dealing with in a race car.
Yeah, so my hand control system is actually, although very technically advanced, a bit crude in the same way and fairly simple. So the only electronic component of my current hand control system that I'm using is the electronic throttle, where it's just a fly-by-wire throttle, the same like it is for my teammates that are using the standard throttle down with their feet. So
Yeah.
we flip a switch for hand or foot, depending if I'm driving or if my teammate Harry Gottsacker is driving. And then the brake system is a mechanical brake system that through some pulleys and linkages pushes down the actual physical brake pedal that my teammate uses.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And to help me achieve further brake pressure, because a race car, there's no power brakes like on a road car. So
Right.
any driver, when they're applying the brake with the amount of force that we need to do to stop the car as quickly as we do, it's some 150, 200 pounds. Imagine in a leg press just pushing the pedal down. So me trying to squeeze with my hands, I can't achieve the same amount that an able-bodied person can with their leg. So I have a pneumatic actuator that aids me in pushing the pedal down, and that's pretty much it. It gets the job done. It's maybe not the fanciest way of going about it, and we're constantly developing and trying to come up with the next system to hopefully get me to higher categories.
Hey, let's get it. I mean, I've always said race car drivers live by a different credo than Tim May does. I mean, I like to go fast and stuff, but the going fast and racing, you know what I mean? There are a lot of guys who can do laps, but they can't necessarily fast laps, but they can't necessarily keep I call it the four-dimensional world going on in their head from a competitive standpoint, which is you're also racing somebody else, when did it become obvious to you that was back? Or if, I know it probably never left you from a desire standpoint, but that you could handle all the mechanics in your car and still be at the front, if you follow my drift, or fighting somebody for a lead.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't be tested until my first race back, in
Yeah.
Daytona in 2022. And I believe I qualified sixth, fifth, seventh, something like that for the first race. Not as well as I was hoping. And I told myself, yeah, exactly, right. If you're not first, you're disappointed. But I told myself, if this was me as an able-bodied driver, I'd be disappointed if I didn't at least make up one spot on this opening lap. And I hadn't done a race start since, the crash where I was paralyzed in 2018. So, I figured, I gotta do what I know. And it was just honestly second nature. I was able to pick off, I think, one or two cars on the opening lap. And once I finished that first lap, I'm like, yeah, I still got it. It never left.
Yeah.
And then from there we settled in, and actually got on the podium in my first race back with my teammate at the time, Mark Wickens. So it was an amazing first opportunity to really prove to myself, but I think I proved to a lot of others that the ability never left. It was just more trying to get the opportunity, which thankfully Hyundai and Bryan Herta Autosport gave me.
Hey, this may be a tough question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. You watch the Indy 500 this year, for example. You know what I'm talking about. But the daring that was going on in that race almost from the start, and even on the last lap, like Pato Award was talking about, just the daring moves that had to be made to win that race and things. Saturday of this past Sunday at Detroit in those Indy cars, there were just some guys that just were diving into places that probably, shouldn't have been doing that, if you follow my drift. I mean, where does that come from for race car drivers? That thought of, risk it all. It may be putting it a little bit over the top and stuff, but where does that come from? I mean, for example, did you always have that I'm going to jump off the high board, I don't care kind of mentality? I mean, explain where that comes from for race car drivers.
I think every race poses its own challenges. If you think, typically the harder the track is to overtake, the more desperate the drivers become.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter if it's IndyCar or the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series or the IMSA WeatherTech Series or Formula One. It's really kind of just the nature of the beast. And if you have an opportunity, it might be your only opportunity for who knows how many laps. You might never get that chance again. So you always have to try and make the most of it. And then also from the defending driver, they understand that if you can fight off this one challenge, you're probably going to be safe for a handful more laps. So
Yeah.
it takes two to tango, in my opinion. Sure. And if we think back to Detroit and last IndyCar race, there was a lot of penalties being handed out, and most of the time they're probably fairly accurate. But at the same point, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it was the defending driver that was putting the overtaking driver in a vulnerable spot. And then it's always the overtaking driver's responsibility to make a clean and safe pass. But if the overtaking driver is also only given one option, which is contact, what's going to be the outcome? So it's chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? But the Indy 500 was a wild one. It was an amazing race. It was rain delayed, but boy, it did not disappoint once they got going. And it actually made me wonder if the Indy 500 should always be an evening start, because I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the driver sitting around all day just thinking about what they wanted to do, but it was a spicy race. There was crazy passes from the first lap to the last, and it was a great one to watch. And I was actually on the timing stand working with Marco Andretti for that Indy 500. And unfortunately, I ended a little early, but it was a fun one to be a part of.
I was going to say, people say they ought to put lights at the place so they can race, and I go, no, just put headlights on the cars. Let's see what happens then. Hey, last thing, you and your teammates, how do y'all work between? Give people an idea of how hard it is or difficult it is to change drivers with you and stuff. And did you have to pass a test that you could get out of a car in case something happens before they would allow you to race again?
Yeah, exactly. IMSA takes safety very seriously, and I have to do the same extraction test as every other driver, that I need to, get out of the cockpit in a sufficient manner and in a timely manner. And it's, so I think I had to leave, get out of the car within 5 seconds. Obviously I don't, end up standing when I'm on the other side, but for me, just getting myself evacuated out of the car in an efficient manner in case of emergency is what was important for everybody. And then in terms of driver changes, obviously mine looks a little different. I have a helper that carries me to the car if I'm getting into the car, and then carries me out of the car if I'm getting out. So it's still, once I'm in the cockpit, it's all the same driver change things, fastening seatbelts or taking seatbelts off, getting myself into a position where I can be basically pulled out of the car. And then, likewise being pushed in. So we're getting pretty good. We're constantly getting better. It's a facet of sports car racing and endurance racing that gets practiced almost as much as the mechanics changing tires. So for us, we're doing driver change practice every day when we're at the racetrack. And then with me, it was a little unique, where at the beginning I was actually doing driver change practice with my helper back at the shop, just trying to figure out the dance of what it looked like and how to get the most out of it. And at our last race in Laguna Seca a few weeks back, we actually did a 21-second driver change, which is our best so far.
Wow.
And then, I think we're right up there with what our teammates are able to do. So we're finally getting to the point now where we don't have to worry about losing track position or anything like we had to in the early stages of my return to racing. We're getting there. I'm not going to stop until I'm the fastest driver change person, but so we still got some work to do.
Yeah, that's that's never going to leave you to be the fastest. Real quick, we got a couple seconds left here. What is it about Mid-Ohio? I would think this is one of those tracks you back into racing you really enjoy, just the ebb and flow, the up and down, the fast straightaway, and then the tight turns and stuff. What is it about Mid-Ohio that's attractive to you?
Honestly, what makes Mid-Ohio for me, it's the spectators, it's the atmosphere, it's the fans, it's the camping, everything that goes on, regardless if it's an IndyCar race, an IMSA race, or a weekend club race. It's always amazing, and they really make the track. As a driver, the track's really fun to drive. There's a lot of character. It's very technical, so car placement is super important, and being precise with what in your steering inputs is really important. There's no room for error. But now with the track being resurfaced, it's kind of opens up a whole new can of worms for everybody. You know, if I think back to Mid-Ohio, I think of the character it had with, you know, the bump right at turn into turn 11 or the bump at apex for turn 12.
Yeah.
That really could change the whole balance of the race car. You know, or the concrete sections at the apex of turn 1 or at the keyhole or whatever. There was always quirkiness to the track, which kind of made it what it was. And you know, it's always interesting going to the same track that has a whole new surface, because although, you know, the configuration is exactly the same, you have to actually now drive it differently. So like your tricks that you've developed over the years to go around Mid-Ohio might actually have to change this year. So for us, it's going to be important to get on top of the setup. You know, I'm sure even though the track's the same, the setup won't be the same from the last time we were there. So we're going to have to try to get on top of that. And thankfully, we've got a good team behind us at Bryan Herta Autosport to get our Hyundai Elantra and TCR car in a good place.
Yeah, it always comes down to the grip, right? And you've got the grip. Hey, boy, Robert Wickens, man, once again, man, what an honor, what a joy it is to talk to you as a race car driver, my friend.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Gut, appreciate you, brother.
Awesome.
Perfect.